Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session Identity Lifecycle and Privileged Account Management. I am Shilpa Sharma, and I will be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. Also, admissions are currently open. For further details about our courses, please visit our website www.eccu.edu. Our speaker for today's session, Tejas Shroff. Tejas is the Senior Director of Managed Security Services at NTT DATA, where he leads the Identity and Access Management practice. He is also an adjunct professor at the University of Texas at Dallas, UTD, where he teaches various cybersecurity courses to graduate students at the Jindal School of Management. Tejas is a board member of the FBI-affiliated non-profit InfraGard National, serves on the advisory board for Collin College Cybersecurity Program and mentors the UTD Cybersecurity Club. Without any further delay, I would hand over the session to you, Tejas.
Thank you very much, Shilpa. So, this is the background Shilpa has already shared. I'll jump into. So, I'll start off with talking a little bit about identity and access management history because both identity lifecycle and privilege account management both fall into the greater IAM space. So, I'd like to set a little bit of a history why IAM is so important. So, it's not like identity and access management is a new thing. People are talking all about identity right now, but identity's been around for a while. Dates back almost to 1960s when IBM had developed what we call it as a resource access control facility for the mainframe systems. Uh, Identity has become a big thing right now because earlier the network defined the boundaries where you could work from. Now identity defines the boundaries. So distributed computing, which led to a need for IAM, which could manage the identities and access across multiple systems and platforms, which led to the development of LDAP, or the other way people know it right now is more like Active Directory. Obviously, with 1990s, we got into more and more web-based applications, and the Identity Federation started taking precedence, like SAML and open authorization, like OAuth, were the technologies which were used to do some identity federation. Most of you might be doing identity federation without you realizing you are doing that. You're probably using your social media login, like your Facebook logins or your uh, even your Gmail logins to connect to applications. So that's what you call it as a federation of identity. And obviously, the 2000s have changed the landscape completely because now we are into the cloud computing world. Lots and lots of mobile devices are there and they're coming out with new and new devices every few days. So you need to make sure that your experience getting into any environment is as seamless as it gets. So having said that, I'll move to the next slide. So earlier identity and access management was like a side story. Okay, you needed it, but it did not have as much of precedence. Now, with pandemic and the remote work and the expansion of identities, ex- explosion of offensive or operational technology, and IAM is now the center of cybersecurity universe. IAM basically holds the keys to the kingdom. It's the point of entry into any organization's environment. Access control, if you notice any data breaches, you find out access control is number one threat when it comes to somebody taking over your access and abusing those access is your number one threat, and it continues to be the number one threat. Pre-pandemic, at least, network was considered to be the security perimeter, as I mentioned. Network defined the boundaries for you to work. Now, your experience can be driven by identity, which becomes your new security perimeter. Earlier, you would go to office or college or wherever you would go, and once you were in the building, that's what defined your perimeter. Now, people are working from anywhere. People working from airport, people working from coffee shop, anywhere. They need to have the same security and the same experience as you would get while working from your network. So when remote work has increased, when cloud-based work has increased, network is no longer driving what you can do. Identity drives your boundaries. So that's why what we mean by identity is your new security perimeter. So if we are looking at a digital perimeter, we need to establish an identity trust model, right? So there are no physical boundaries, but yes, there are borderless digital and virtual environments that we have to deal with. And hence, we insist that we understand the term security perimeter well. So why identity matters? As I mentioned, identity continues to be the biggest driver. Insider threats have increased. Digitalization, cloud service, and remote work has just uh, changed the landscape of how we operate. Post pandemic, if some of you might be, and a lot of the attendees here are not, uh, have not been around based on their ages, what I got demographics, they haven't been around for too long. But at the same time, I can tell you that a lot of you have not seen the world where people used to actually go in and do the work. But now with digitalization, with cloud, with remote work, everything has changed. And for us, the security professionals, that means the risk has increased because now you can connect from anywhere. Earlier, you would go to office, you probably came home. A lot of people did not even log into the system till they went back to work next day. Now you're almost always connected, be it for your personal work, be it for your actual work. You're always connected. So that's why identity needs to make sure that every time somebody accesses, it doesn't allow them more access than what they need to get. Regulatory compliance has increased. There are rules like GDPR, there are laws like CCPA regulations, various laws, PCI DSS compliance. So all those compliance requirements have made sure that identity needs to strengthen your overall security posture. As I said, operational technology, Internet of Things, and non-human identities are increasing continuously. The numbers being thrown out are uh, 45. I'm even seeing numbers like 75 non-human identities for each human identity. That could mean your service accounts, that could mean your device machine identities. So the non-human identities are growing by leaps and bounds. The fragmented identity data needs to be reduced. There is a lot of identity data which is not uh, integrated, it's fragmented, which is causing a lot of problems. Zero trust, which is which used to be the flavor of yesterday, no longer because now people are moving to other buzzwords. But zero trust, it still continues to be a challenge because we don't get true zero trust, and zero trust needs to come from the fact that never trust, always verify. Right? We need to continuously verify if somebody is trying to access that they have the right access, right authentication, right authorization. And obviously, we need to continue to strike the right balance between security and user experience. Anybody studying security would say that user experience and security continue to be uh, opposite sides of the same coin, and um, it's very difficult to balance the two. And obviously, the ransomware incidents, if you watch any news channel, every week you'll see one big ransomware incident has happened. So what is identity lifecycle management? I'll give you, before reading this out, I would say when you join an organization, when you join a college, when you start in the program, you are given some accesses, and you don't get all the accesses at once, but some accesses are given to you, and that is what we call it as birthright access. So identity lifecycle management is your act of managing your identities and access levels from day one of your employment, day one of your school. And those who've been in the program would know that you don't get all the accesses day one, but as you go along, your accesses increase. Maybe to more applications, maybe to more systems, but your accesses definitely increase as you go along. So, in the world of identity, we've been using a terminology called JML or joiner, mover, lever, right? When you join, you get particular access. As you move into the organization, you get higher levels of accesses for what you need. Maybe your role changes, maybe you get promoted, so your access increases. And lever is when you leave an organization. Either you leave because you find another better opportunity, or you leave because you retire. I don't know the reason. Intentionally you leave, unintentionally sometimes your role gets affected, but all these things lead you to the lever workflow, and that is what defines your identity lifecycle, joiner, mover, lever program, because that's how your accesses are governed. And somebody might say, oh, what is so important? But if you are, once you start working, once you start going through the life cycle, you would know that yes, this happens with you in a day in day out basis without us realizing it. So onboarding, ongoing access tweaks, monitoring and reporting, offboarding are the steps in a typical life cycle. You onboard a user, you continuously uh, provide their tweaks to their accesses, you continue to monitor and report if any risk is increased, and then you go ahead and offboard a particular resource. These are the steps which you do in a typical identity lifecycle. So, from a definition point of view, identity lifecycle is a continuous cycle of managing users' identities within a system or network, typically in an organization. It involves several stages that ensure the secure and efficient handling of user identities and access controls. A modern IAM tool allows for access automation once an identity is created based on the role and group the identity is associated with. ILM solution will allow you to perform lifecycle management. It cuts down the time and the manual effort which is required in managing those identities. So it's very critical that we understand how your accesses are governed, and at the same time you don't want manually to go every time, because every time the manual intervention happens, accidentally it could leave a door open, which can cause more problems. So you need to automate as much of it as possible. So, and the other big term which we are going to look at is privileged access management, right? So privileged access management is controlling and monitoring access to your sensitive systems, data, which are accessed by privileged accounts. What are privileged accounts? Privileged accounts are the accounts with higher uh, capabilities, higher rights, higher privileges, right? So what do you mean by privileged accounts? A privileged account is something like a user admin account, like a domain admin account, like a super user account. These accounts come with more privileges, more power for that particular user to perform bigger functions, right? We all know that if you're able to access, if you have a normal user account and all of a sudden you're granted the privileges, right? Then you are able to control a lot more into the environment. So, but in the world of security, we always look at the flip side, right? So when you have privileged access management and privileged accounts, we are ensuring that because somebody got more access, for people in the security, we need to pull back and think about, okay, somebody has more privileges, I need to protect them more. Likewise, even with in any particular asset, right? If the asset is more powerful, more privileged, we need to protect that asset a lot more, right? Because when people try to compromise, that will be their first target. So you want to monitor, detect, and prevent unauthorized privileged access to the critical resources, right? The two primary use cases about primarily preventing your credential theft, and you want to also achieve compliance. One of the biggest requirements these days in a ransomware incident is if a ransomware incident happens, one of the biggest control they want to put in is the privileged access management. Either it's there, then you need to strengthen it, or if it's not there, then obviously it's an issue. If you don't have privileged access management, you may be refused cyber insurance. So, again, which is very critical to know for people that privileged access management is something that is protecting your privileged accounts. And you might say, oh, that's pretty easy. No, it's not very easy. There are lots and lots of technologies which have been put in place because now you no longer have the privileged access just tied to the normal users. Now the machine users, there's a lot of information going on where the humans are not even talking to each other. The human identities are not even connecting. Machine to machine identities are communicating with all this automation, with all this AI in place. So it is becoming critical that we ensure that your privileged accesses are protected. It's a process of using software to control who gets the keys to the kingdom. As I said earlier, IAM holds the keys to the kingdom. So this is the process of making sorry a way to control who gets the keys to the kingdom. A privileged account, as I said, can be human or non-human, and it doesn't always need to be associated with a particular person. So, what is the difference between your identity lifecycle management and privileged access management? And EC Council will be sharing these slides, so you can go through these. But identity lifecycle management covers the management of identities, everything from initial onboarding to changes to eventual offboarding. As I said, the joiner mover leaver process. Privileged access management doesn't focus on joiner mover leaver process, but it focuses that during your identity lifecycle, if your privileges went up, say when during you joined, you did your initial onboarding, but then you moved across in the organization, you got promoted, you got more roles and responsibilities. That means you got more privileges, right? So once you got more privileges, you needed to be granted better accesses. And once you're granted better accesses, you need to be governed better. You need to be monitored better, right? Because the risk associated is higher. So you require additional controls to be put in. You need probably stronger multi-factor authentication. Maybe you need session monitoring and recording, detailed logging and auditing. And there are features like just-in-time access, where privilege rights are only granted immediately when they need it and automatically revoked afterwards. So these are some of the things, and a, a short webinar cannot solve all these things. So if you guys have any questions on that front, you should possibly reach out to EC Council or even me for any guidance on how to strengthen your knowledge on this front. But in a privileged access management, a lot of software are providing you session monitoring and recording. So they are recording your entire session of what you are doing as a privileged account, and those are typically required by audits, which ensure that you are able to capture that information so that you don't run into any issues. Because once a privileged account went in and they did something, there's no way to undo it. So that's why it's critical that you understand the difference. So what I put it out there in the table format earlier, now I have them as just a pictorial way of showing it to you. A typical process of identity lifecycle and a typical uh, privileged account management. So yeah, I'm not going to sit and walk through this process, but at the same time, you explain the process. This will grant you an ability to go through it. The one on the left is IAM Lifecycle, where you go through the provision process, then you go through the authenticate, authorize, log and monitor, and then audit the process. So this is all about your access. So sometimes people do not understand outside of IAM that what access management really means. People say, oh, it's just granting somebody the access. No, it's not. It's about granting the access, it's about monitoring. It's like, let's take an example of all of us maybe living in our own homes, right? And do you, if somebody comes to you and says, can you give me keys to your home? Will you give it to them? When you're saying I'm protecting my home, what is the best way to protect your home, right? What is the best way that somebody can get inside your home? By capturing the keys to your home. That's what it is. When we are protecting our access, that's what it is. We are making sure that nobody is able to enter our home, which is our company, which is our school, which is our anything. That's what you're protecting. The access is what you're protecting. Because if somebody gets the access, they can do whatever they want. They can come in, they can destroy, they can steal, they can do anything. So you're protecting the access. And that's what we say you're protecting the keys to the kingdom, keys to your home, right? And let's use the privileged access as another example. If somebody got into your home, you have a locker inside your home, you have your bedrooms which are locked, you have your um, cupboards which are locked, right? Is your house key the same as your cupboard key? No, right? Obviously, that is even the higher privileges. That's where you're storing your more important things. Each of you may be living in your homes, and maybe your parents, they are protecting certain things from you when you're a child, right? And why are they protecting it? Because they don't want you to accidentally or intentionally steal, damage, anything of that sort. So that's what it is. If you just try and understand, these are the two simple keys. One key is to your home, and the other key is to your cupboards. Both those keys are separate. The cupboards is like your security vault. where you're putting your important things. You don't put everything in a security vault, right? You put only your important things in your cupboard and you lock it, right? Like every day's newspaper, if you're getting it, you're not putting it in your cupboard and locking it, right? Because that's something which you don't need to protect. What needs to be protected goes in and gets locked. So just try and understand, and that's a very basic difference, but it is an important difference for you to understand. So as I was discussing, we are moving into the world of non-human identities. These are the digital identities which can identify, authenticate, and authorize machines, devices, and IT infrastructure. Right? It's a broad category, not associated or operated by a human. They are machine identities. If you look at it in the modern day factories, a lot of communication is happening as machine to machine communication. You don't even get involved. A lot of automated um, assembly lines are working where one machine is passing the information to the next machine and you're not even getting involved. People only look at it at the end of the day what went wrong, unless there is a trigger which causes you to look at it earlier, right? But if you are in a machine identity and if somebody captures that, what can happen? There have been instances, I'll give you an example. Somebody had tried to uh, capture and disrupt an automated water making plant where they tried to increase the percentage of hydrogen. A typical water molecule is two hydrogen molecules to one oxygen, H2O is formed, right? But here somebody tried to bump it up by 1,000 times. And if hydrogen content goes up in a typical water, that will create a lot of disruptions. That was caught earlier and the problem was solved. But what it needs is a lot of monitoring on the machine identities, more so than even the human identities, because humans can make mistakes, but machines can be hijacked to cause more mistakes. And they can cause much bigger damage than stealing somebody's credit card information. So, why the landscape is becoming more and more difficult? Automation is great, but automation comes with another added challenge. So, some vendors and service providers they do prefer to have some sort of trusted relationships built in between both of them. So a non-human identity can refer to identities used by services or applications that interact with other cloud resources and can exclude the identities associated with physical devices. A typical factory floor. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a factory floor before, but that is very different from a corporate office. There are a lot of factory floor workers who do not even have access to their phones and devices. So we need to look at a completely different way for managing those identities. And as I said, right, with virtualization and cloud-based services, the distinctions are blurring, but that also means challenges increasing. So some of the terminologies I'll talk about for um, you to understand. Shilpa, how are we doing on time?
Yes, Tejas, we are on time only.
Okay. So user access review, which is very critical because we have to keep on validating if the users have access, and there are certification campaigns which are um, implemented as a part of your identity lifecycle management. So you're continuously checking the users because a lot of times in the organizations, developers ask for access. And once you get the access, nobody is going to go and say, okay, take my access away. That's that's not a common task, right? So people are going to get the access and they would go ahead and continue to have the access. So what happens in that case? You have to do a continuous user access review, make sure the right people have the right access. And if somebody doesn't need the access anymore, that needs to be revoked. Certification campaigns is where it is validated if the right users have the right access, right privileged users have the right privileges, etc. Application onboarding. If you guys remember the initial example I gave, that when you start in an organization, you get some birthright access. Sometimes there is a limitation why you only got uh, access to few applications to begin with, because those applications were not onboarded onto your automated ILM platform. So more and more applications continue to be onboarded, more and more applications continue to be connected to the identity governance and administration platform so that you are able to do the automatic identity administration. Two other things which you need to understand the difference between is access aggregation and access creep. So access aggregation is where you are aggregating the access for many systems, but that can lead to creep. Well, access creep happens unintentionally, and because of aggregation, you may end up getting. So, if there are, I'll give you an example where a person is a student in certain class, but is a teaching assistant in the other class, right? If both those, and the same person is a student and teaching assistant, so for the class that the student is teaching assistant, they have more access. But for the class where they are student, they don't have as much access. But if you aggregate their accesses and if you give them the access as a teaching assistant for all the classes, then you are basically getting into a situation what you call it as an access creep. Because then they have higher access than they need. There's a principle of least privileges which needs to be maintained. The other important thing is to understand fine-grained versus coarse-grained access control. So coarse-grained access control offers a broader and a more generalized approach, while fine-grained offers a detailed and context-sensitive permissions. So fine-grained offers tighter security. As I mentioned, zero trust is where you're focusing on. There's even something what you call as a zero trust network access, but zero trust is typically done in the full uh, end-to-end systems, right from your identity to your network to your applications to your data. All of these need to be protected. I would add devices to that. Means right now you're getting an access. A lot of you are getting your MFA. Sometimes your MFA is not sent because your device is not a trusted device. MFA, if you think that it is protecting you completely, then think again, right? There is a lot of people don't like when the MFA is being sent, right? The OTP is being sent to your phones, your devices. A lot of people don't like it. So why is it asking us to enter? But that's because somebody may have seen your phone one time, they may have used your OTP. By challenging you again, you're making sure that at least you're able to authenticate. So every move needs to be challenged, and that's what zero trust does. It's a proactive security framework which helps you protect your assets, your sensitive data. It provides you with the foundation. I'll give you a couple of case studies here. A top five global financial institution faced significant challenges with existing identity management. They wanted to automate and enhance their fragmented and inconsistent processes. By automating an annual and quarterly access reviews, they minimize the ad hoc data, they control their costs, while the risk of non-compliance was significantly improved. They were flagged earlier with the audit, and this, by putting just these controls in place, the risk of non-compliance was reduced, their costs were significantly reduced, their costs were went up initially because you had to implement those. But obviously, the overall cost of doing business, because the risk got reduced significantly. Earlier, they had lots of people, if they would leave, their accesses were not revoked. So by doing this continuous quarterly, annual access reviews, they minimize that. On the topic of audit, I'll also mention about Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, a US government agency. They had deployed an industry-leading PAM tool to transition their 30 disparate information systems, which were disparate, disjointed, and they were having a lot of broken data. So CISA's operations team found effective solutions, and they kind of stitched them together so that you no longer have to worry about getting the access to the wrong people. And look at the comment from the CISA Associate of Chief Operations. He says, I'm a big proponent of automation in IT security rather than relying on people. Machines don't have good days and bad days. But that also is a loaded comment because machines also don't have emotions and they don't have ways to act. So it has to be a combination. You cannot just simply automate and think that things are taken care of. These are some of the links which I'm sharing here. But at this point, I'd like to open it up for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tejas, for delivering such an informative session, and our attendees share the same sentiments. If you're interested to learn more about our program, do let us know in the poll that's going to be conducted now. If you would like to learn more, please select yes, and we will schedule a call to provide you with more information. So, Tejas, shall we start with the Q&A?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So, our first question to you is, can you elaborate on fragmented identity data?
Yeah, so fragmented identity data is one of the things which could come from the access aggregation part. Where there, the biggest reason for fragmented identity data comes from the non-connected systems, because companies over the years have merged, they have consolidated, they've got a lot of different um, basic uh, systems of truth. They were using different systems which are not connected, they are not integrated, their directories are different. And once that happens, the problem is you are dealing with situations where two systems are not talking to each other. And that's what leads to the fragmented identity data.
Thank you, Tejas. Our next question to you is, are there any scenarios where we cannot go for access automation in identity lifecycle management only where only manual works?
If there are any scenarios like that, they would go away very soon, because more and more companies are getting audited and more companies are saying that you have to go away from manual, because see, manual is great, but manual is cumbersome, manual is time consuming, manual is risk. We all know that humans are sometimes doing multitasking. Why is a lot of repetitive tasks going to AI? Why is a lot of repetitive tasks going to the automation? Because ma- humans are found to be not as efficient, with due regards. Humans are not found to be as consistent. The previous comment which you read here, right? That uh, the last comment, incidentally, I am a big proponent of automation rather than relying on people. Machines don't have bad days and good days, right? So humans can have good days and bad days. You may not be feeling well. You may be having some problem at home and in your personal life, in your professional life, and the actions that you take might get affected because of those. The emotion comes into play. I'm not saying with the manual thing, you're leaving a lot of focus on the human element. And that is what, and also we all know, right, the amount of work a machine can do, or automation can do in uh, the time versus what a human can do is a lot different. So that's the reason. So, good question, but at the same time, I would say um, even if there are places where only manual thing works, you need to look at the option of automating it. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Tejas, for answering that question. Our next question to you is, up to what percentage can PAM prevent credential theft and compliance?
The percentage I wouldn't be able to answer, but I would say it has significantly helped in preventing credential theft and compliance. Because if you look at it, um, not having a PAM has caused a lot more problems. So having a PAM has definitely reduced. It's like putting a value of an intangible, right? What if my house was stolen? How much data would I, or how much money would I lose? You don't know till it is done. But at least you know that by protecting, you are not losing data. By protecting your keys, as I was mentioning, right? If somebody was trying to access your cupboard keys, and if you have protected that, even if somebody entered your home, at least they won't find those cupboard keys. Now, can they go and break your cupboard and do that? That's a different thing. But by you not letting somebody in, so that's why you cannot put just protecting your cupboard keys. You have to also protect your house keys. It's a combination of that you have to protect both your access keys and your privileged access management keys. So what percentage? I won't be able to put a number to that, but at least by not having some PAM, you your risk is definitely much higher.
Thank you, Tejas, for answering that question. Our next question to you is, what are good reference books, online references on IAM? Also, what is mandatory IAM tool that needs to be learned to go in detail into this area?
It's a very loaded question. There is no one mandatory tool. What I would suggest is try and read up a little bit more on IAM. What you would know is because there are three main uh, pillars of IAM. I would call it. One is the identity and access management, which is core IAM. Access management, which is where your SSO MFA falls. Then you have your privileged access management, and then you have your identity governance and administration. So uh, the best place to find more information, obviously, uh, you should try and join various uh, news groups or something. There are a lot of good places like Gartner, Forrester, Everest. These are all doing a lot of research on the IAM solutions. They are doing a lot of research on what the best IAM tools are. In my role as a identity access management delivery head, I cannot pinpoint and say use just one tool. But what I can say is identity and access management is a very broad field, and I don't think you'd go wrong if you pick access management, if you pick privileged access management, or if you pick identity governance, each of those, and a lot of them are entering into the other areas. So there is a concept of something called as a converged IAM too. Um, yeah, if you guys have any questions specifically, you can reach out to me. But like I said, I'm not able to uh, point you towards one tool. And there are lots of places, as I said, Gartner, Forrester, Everest. There are other um, core security researchers you can look at. There are the identity landscape is continuously growing. There are places like Identity Verse, Gartner IAM Summit. These are the ones which do share some common publicly available data. So try and get access to those, and that will definitely help you.
Thank you, Tejas, for answering that question. Our next question to you is ZTNA automated or manual process?
ZTNA is an automated process, but obviously you need to make sure that it's fully automated. Otherwise, you may leave some manual. Uh, See, a lot of times people processes can be automated, but a lot of times people try to save money and leave some doors open themselves. So, which is where they try to say, "Oh, this part I can do it manually," and that's where the problem starts. So, you're automating, try to automate as fully as possible. Hmm?
Thank you for answering that question. Our next question to you we know that human identity lifecycle is joiner, mover, lever process. How do we manage the lifecycle of machine identities?
Good question. So, there is not in means typically a machine can also have a JML life, right? A machine can be brought in, a new machine, you probably don't want to grant the access. It's like getting a system, right? You need to go through the hardening process, right? Which is where the hardening process makes it into like a mover. When you come in, you have limited access. Once your device gets onto the network, it starts getting hardened. It starts getting the patches, right? That's your mover process. And then when you're trying to decommission the process, that's your lever process. So joiner mover lever is not just it's a process driven thing. It's not tied to a human or a machine. So it runs parallel with both human as well as non-human.
Thank you, Tejas, for answering that question. Our next question to you how can we use any AI preventive methods to be applied to IAM?
There is a lot of research which is going on in IAM and AI. Lots of tools are integrating AI. AI is almost a given that it is going to be integrated. I think I would suggest pick up any of the top IAM vendors and read about the AI being leveraged in there. Again, like I said, in my role, I cannot just point you towards one tool, and I don't want to say that just look at this particular tool. I'm right now at a conference as well, and I can tell you there is a lot of work going on with AI being brought into this. So AI is definitely uh, working towards changing how we do IAM.
Thank you, Tejas, for answering that question. We'll take last two questions for the day. Our next question to you what is best PAM solution and best security practice in 2025?
Wow. What is the best PAM solution? I would again suggest looking at a Gartner data. I know the answer to that one, but like I said, I cannot answer that, or I don't want to answer that because every solution is different based on your need, based on the cost you're wanting to pay. There are a lot of solutions. And also you have to understand when you say best solution, right? What does it mean by best solution? Sometimes, like, let me ask you this: what is the best car? Right? If somebody asks you what is the best car, it comes down to what the budget you have. It comes down to what the features you need, right? There may be cars which may be offering you lots and lots of features, but do you really need those features? If you don't need them, then that is not the best solution for you. So the best solution is catered to your needs, amount of money you want to pay for it, and um, we also tell people in the world of security, right? At the end of the day, you you have a limited budget. It's your wallet, how much money you have, and how much money it's like doing your home budget. Do you spend all your money on the single item, or you spread it out, right? So you have to look at it, what's your need and how much money you want to spread it out and pay. I'm not dodging your question. I'm just telling you there is nothing like a best solution. Best solution doesn't mean you need that solution. You have to look at uh, the best solution. Now, the trends for security for 2025, there are lots of trends. One of them, major one, is ransomware protection. Cyber resilience has been the mantra for a lot of enterprises that people are following, because cyber resilience is something that is growing like anything, because there is a need. There are more and more disruptions coming, so you need to make your enterprises cyber resilient so that if somebody tries to push you over, you don't fall off, right? So you need to build your systems, and the best thing is if you build it first, so that if you are able to be thrown off, you can always counter that, right? So just cyber resilience, ransomware protection are two of your biggest uh, things that you need to look at. But again, technology trends 2025 will tell you a lot of different things. So
Thank you, Tejas, for answering that question. Our last question to you is, what are the key challenges organizations face when implementing a zero trust network access model?
the key challenges comes from the resistance from people, because now you're asking people to change the way they are working. So that's your number one challenge. Second, as I said, the fragmented identities with the disjointed systems. Sometimes systems are not talking to each other, so that is the problem. Third thing, which comes from the fact, is uh, sometimes you have some on-prem systems and some cloud-based systems, so you need to make sure you're able to connect. Um, the fourth one is, I would say, legacy systems. Depending on the number of legacy systems that you have, how easily you're able to integrate your legacy systems and connect them to an automated platform. These are some of the challenges I can think of.
Thank you again to our wonderful speaker, Tejas, for answering those questions and for the great presentation and knowledge shared with our global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. Before we conclude the webinar, Tejas, would you like to give a small message to our audience?
No, I think identity and access management for a lot of people has been uh, something which has not been known. But if you do any research, uh, trying to find some good mentors in this space means, I have always recognized this as I'm an adjunct faculty. I've even introduced identity and access management as a course in the master's program in the college where I teach. Uh, So I definitely see that this is something which a lot of people have overlooked it, because it has not been that glamorous side of the cybersecurity. But if you look at it, there are lots and lots of tools available, lots and lots of jobs available in the industry, and I would strongly encourage you to read up more if you are interested. I cannot give any guarantees to anyone, but at the same time, I can tell you that the job market for IAM is pretty open. But for that, you need to invest yourself. You need to go through your trainings and learn. Don't try to be all over the place. Even the cloud tools have their own identity management solutions. If you go to AWS, they'll have their own, they'll have Azure will have their own, GCP will have their own identity space. So absolutely do more research. Try to find something, as I said, try to find a mentor, and that will definitely help you.
Thank you so much, Tejas, for the message to our audience.